Imagine pulling up to your local high school track on a quiet Saturday morning. The sun's barely peeking over the horizon, and there's just one person out there, a dedicated athlete running sprints, checking his stopwatch, focused entirely on his training. A pretty normal sight, right? Well, what happened next at Central Valley High School last weekend turned into anything but normal. The crisp morning air was suddenly filled with the sound of police sirens. Why? Because one woman decided that a black man training at a public school track didn't fit her idea of what belonged there. Little did she know, she was about to become the center of a story that would spread across social media and teach us all something about prejudice, persistence, and the power of keeping your cool when others lose theirs. Meet James Richardson, a 28-year-old former track star who now coaches youth athletics in his spare time. Every weekend for the past 3 years, he's been coming to this same track to maintain his fitness and practice the techniques he teaches his students. It's his routine: wake up at 5 a.m., protein shake in hand, ready to put in the work while most people are still hitting the snooze button. That morning started just like any other. James was doing his usual warm-up laps when he noticed a woman in a white SUV parked near the track entrance. She sat there watching him for almost 20 minutes, phone in hand. James tried to shake off the uneasy feeling and focus on his training. After all, he had a youth track meet to coach the following weekend, and his kids were counting on him. But then everything changed. Two police cruisers pulled into the parking lot, lights flashing. The woman, who we'll call Karen, though that's not her real name, had apparently called 911 reporting a suspicious individual who was casing the school. She told dispatch she was concerned about school safety and that she'd never seen someone like him in the neighborhood before. What happened next left everyone speechless: the responding officers, a woman who made the call, and the small crowd of early morning dog walkers who had gathered to watch the scene unfold. Because James Richardson wasn't just any athlete trying to stay in shape. His connection to Central Valley High School went far deeper than anyone could have guessed. The body camera footage from one of the officers captured the whole interaction. You can hear the tension in Karen's voice as she insists that James doesn't belong there. You can see the tired resignation on James's face, an expression that speaks to how familiar this kind of confrontation feels. But then something unexpected happens. One of the officers suddenly breaks into a huge smile. See, sometimes life has a way of delivering perfect moments of justice. Moments that remind us how dangerous it is to judge someone based on appearance. Moments that prove why we should think twice before making assumptions about who belongs where. And this particular moment? Well, it revealed something about James Richardson that changed everything. The woman who called the police that morning thought she was protecting her community. Instead, she ended up learning a powerful lesson about community: who builds it, who belongs to it, and who gets to decide who belongs where. Her call to the police didn't end the way she expected. In fact, it sparked a conversation that would eventually reach millions of people online and force many to confront their own hidden biases. But who exactly was James Richardson? What was his real connection to Central Valley High School? And how did this encounter transform from a potential tragedy into something entirely different? The answer involves an incredible twist of fate, an inspiring journey of perseverance, and a reminder that sometimes our biggest misconceptions lead to our most important learning moments. The truth about James Richardson's identity and his relationship with Central Valley High School would leave the woman in the SUV questioning everything she thought she knew. It would also spark a chain of events that would bring the community together in ways nobody could have predicted. This isn't just another story about racial profiling, though that's certainly part of it. It's a story about judgment and redemption, about the assumptions we make and the price we pay for making them. But most importantly, it's a story about how sometimes the very person we're quick to condemn might be the exact person we should be celebrating. As the body camera footage continues rolling, we see the officer turn to Karen with a look that says he can barely contain himself. He's about to reveal something that will change the entire narrative. Something that will make this story go viral for all the right reasons. Something that proves sometimes life writes better plot twists than any screenwriter ever could. But before we reveal who James Richardson really is and why his presence at that track was more legitimate than anyone could have imagined, let's back up a bit, because to truly appreciate the irony of what happened that morning, you need to understand the full story. A story that begins 15 years earlier, on this very same track, with a young boy who had a dream and the determination to make it come true. 15 years ago, Central Valley High School was a very different place. The track where James now trains was cracked and worn, with weeds pushing through the aging rubber surface. The school itself was struggling. Low test scores, declining enrollment, and a sports program that barely had enough funding to keep the lights on. But for 13-year-old James Richardson, this track was everything. Every morning, rain or shine, you'd find young James running laps before school started. He wasn't part of any team yet, he was too young for that, but he had a dream, and more importantly, he had a mentor who believed in him. Mr. Thompson, the school's longtime janitor, would open the gates early just so James could train. That boy, Mr. Thompson, would tell anyone who'd listen, he's going to put this school on the map someday. James's family lived in the apartment complex just across from the school. His mother worked 2 jobs, one at the local diner and another cleaning offices at night. She couldn't afford fancy training programs or private coaches, but she gave James something even more valuable. She taught him that dedication and hard work could open doors that money couldn't buy. By the time James entered Central Valley High as a freshman, he had already logged more hours on that track than most seniors. The crack of dawn training sessions had become such a regular part of the landscape that teachers arriving early for work would wave to him through their car windows. He wasn't just any student athlete, he was becoming part of the school's very fabric. But life has a way of testing our resolve. During James's sophomore year, budget cuts threatened to eliminate the entire track and field program. The school board said they couldn't justify maintaining a facility that was underutilized. That's when James did something remarkable. He started organizing community track meets. Every Saturday, he'd bring together kids from the neighborhood, teaching them proper running techniques, timing their sprints, helping them set goals. What started as a handful of curious kids grew into dozens. Parents began showing up with lawn chairs and coolers full of drinks. Local businesses started donating supplies. The track that the school board saw as a liability was transforming into a community gathering spot. And at the center of it all was James Richardson, the teenager who refused to let his dream die. By his senior year, James had broken 3 state records and earned a full scholarship to college, but that's not what made him a legend at Central Valley High. It was what he did with his success that set him apart. Every break from college, he'd come back to that same track. He'd work with younger athletes, share training tips, and tell stories about college competition to wide-eyed kids who saw in him what they could become. After college, when most athletes would have moved on to bigger cities with better facilities, James chose to come home. He took a job that surprised everyone who knew him, a position that would keep him close to the track where his journey began, a role that would allow him to inspire a new generation of dreamers and strivers. Which brings us back to that Saturday morning, with police lights flashing and a woman in an SUV about to learn a lesson about hasty judgments. As the officer's body camera kept rolling, you can see him struggling to keep a straight face, because he knew something that Karen didn't. Something that would make her wish she'd never picked up her phone to call 911. The small crowd that had gathered was about to witness one of those rare moments when justice arrives not with a bang, but with a revelation. A moment when prejudice collides head-on with reality, and reality wins in the most poetic way possible. You see, that suspicious person Karen was so concerned about, that black man she thought didn't belong at the school. His connection to Central Valley High School went far beyond just being an early morning track user. The truth about James Richardson's real identity was about to emerge, and it would leave everyone watching the footage with a powerful reminder about the dangers of assumption. The officer, still smiling, reached for his radio, but before he could speak, another vehicle pulled into the parking lot. It was Principal Martinez, arriving early to catch up on some weekend work. As she stepped out of her car, her face lit up with recognition. "James," she called out, waving warmly. "I thought I might find you here." Karen's expression began to shift. Something wasn't adding up. The familiar way the principal greeted this suspicious person suggested there was more to this story than she'd assumed. Much more. And as Principal Martinez walked toward them, she was about to reveal exactly why James Richardson had every right to be on that track. A revelation that would turn this confrontation into a viral moment of perfect justice. But to fully appreciate what happened next, you need to understand just how deeply James Richardson's roots run at Central Valley High School. His story isn't just about athletic achievement or overcoming obstacles. It's about transformation of a school, a community, and countless young lives. And the position he holds today? Well, that's where this story takes its most unexpected turn. Principal Martinez's arrival changed the entire dynamic of that tense Saturday morning. The way she walked across the parking lot, confident, almost amused, suggested she was about to put an end to this misunderstanding. But first, she had a question for Karen, who was still clutching her phone, ready to record whatever happened next. "Ma'am," Principal Martinez said, her voice calm but firm, "did you know that Central Valley High School has one of the top-ranked track and field programs in the state?" Karen shook her head, clearly wondering what this had to do with anything. 5 years ago, we were about to lose our athletic department entirely. Now we send athletes to state championships every year. And do you know who made that happen? The officer's body camera caught Karen's expression shifting from righteousness to uncertainty. She glanced at James, who stood quietly, arms crossed, still wearing his stopwatch around his neck. The same stopwatch Mr. Thompson, the old janitor, had given him all those years ago. But there's another layer to this story that makes Karen's call to the police even more ironic. Just 2 days before this incident, James had been featured in the local newspaper. Not for his athletic achievements, though those were impressive enough. No, the article was about something much more significant, a program he created that was changing lives across the district. You see, James had noticed something during his years of early morning training. He saw kids from the nearby apartment complex, the same one he'd grown up in, watching him through the fence. They were out there early because their parents had to leave for work before school started. These kids had nowhere else to go, and more importantly, no one to show them what was possible. That observation led to Dawn Runners, a before-school program that combined athletic training with academic support. James would open the track at 6 a.m., just like Mr. Thompson had done for him. But he didn't just teach kids how to run. He helped them with homework, talked about college applications, and showed them how discipline in sports could translate to success in life. The program had caught the attention of educational experts across the state. Other schools were starting to implement similar initiatives. And right there, on that track where Karen saw a suspicious person, dozens of kids were finding their path to a better future. As Principal Martinez continued talking, more cars began pulling into the parking lot. Saturday morning practice was about to begin, and James's Dawn Runners were arriving with their parents. One by one, they stepped out of their cars, confusion turning to concern as they saw the police cars. Among them was Marcus, a freshman who reminded James so much of himself at that age. Marcus's mother worked early shifts at the hospital, just like James's mom had. For the past 6 months, Marcus had been showing up every morning, not just to train, but to learn from the man who'd walked the same path before him. The gathering crowd created an unexpected audience for what was about to unfold. Parents who knew James, kids who looked up to him, and community members who'd supported his programs. They'd all stood witness to this collision between prejudice and reality. Karen's discomfort was visible now. The situation she created was spiraling beyond her control. The suspicious person, she reported, was clearly known and respected by everyone else present. But she didn't know the half of it yet, because James Richardson's official position at Central Valley High School, the role that gave him every right to be there that morning, was about to be revealed. Principal Martinez turned to address the growing crowd, but before she could speak, something unexpected happened. Mr. Thompson, now retired but still living nearby, came walking across the field. The old janitor who'd opened the gates for a determined 13-year-old boy all those years ago had heard the commotion and come to see what was wrong. The moment Mr. Thompson appeared, James's composure finally cracked. A smile spread across his face, the first one since the police had arrived. Because if anyone could appreciate the pure irony of this situation, it was the man who'd first recognized James' potential and given him a chance to prove himself. As Mr. Thompson approached, he carried something in his hands, an old photograph that would add yet another layer to this already powerful story. A photograph that would silence any remaining doubts about James Richardson's right to be on that track. A photograph that captured a moment 15 years ago when a young boy with a dream first crossed paths with a janitor who believed in second chances. Mr. Thompson held up the old photograph, its edges worn from years of proud display in the school's main hallway. The image showed a young James Richardson standing on this very track, holding his first ever track meet medal. Next to him stood a younger Mr. Thompson, both of them beaming with pride. But what made this photo special wasn't just the memory it captured. It was the headline below it in the school's trophy case. From Dawn Runner to Legend, the journey begins. The crowd of parents and students gathered closer, forming a semicircle around Karen, who was now shifting uncomfortably from foot to foot. Her phone had disappeared into her pocket, and her earlier certainty had been replaced by something that looked a lot like embarrassment. But she still didn't know the full story. The part that would make her impromptu police call seem even more misguided. Principal Martinez stepped forward again, but this time she addressed everyone present. "You know," she began, "when the school board was looking to fill the position, they interviewed candidates from all over the country. People with decades of experience, impressive resumes, connections to major athletic programs." She paused, looking directly at Karen. "But sometimes the perfect person for a job is someone who understands the heart of a community, someone who's lived its struggles and shares its dreams." The morning sun had fully risen now, casting long shadows across the track where James had spent countless hours of his life. The same track where he trained as a teenager, where he'd broken state records, where he'd returned to mentor others. And now, where he stood facing a woman who'd assumed he didn't belong. One of James's Dawn Runners, a 7th grade girl named Sophia, stepped forward. She was wearing her track team jacket, the same design James had worn 15 years ago. "Show her the wall," Sophia said, her voice clear and confident. The other kids nodded in agreement, knowing exactly what she meant. The wall she referred to as something special, a mural inside the school's athletic center that told a story of transformation. A story that began with a crumbling track and a determined young runner, and led to something no one could have predicted. Something that made Karen's assumption about James being an outsider even more ironic. Mr. Thompson, still holding the old photograph, turned to Karen. "Would you like to see where this boy ended up?" he asked, his voice gentle but carrying the weight of years of wisdom. "Would you like to know why he's here every Saturday morning, why these kids look up to him, why Principal Martinez trusts him with our school's future?" The police officers, who had remained silent observers throughout this exchange, were now grinning openly. They'd known James's identity from the moment they arrived, which explained their relaxed demeanor despite Karen's urgent call about a suspicious person. Just then, a bus pulled into the parking lot. Through its windows, you could see more students in track uniforms, the varsity team arriving for their weekend practice. As they filed out, each one greeted James with a mix of respect and affection that spoke volumes about his role in their lives. Principal Martinez checked her watch and smiled. "It's almost time," she said. "James, would you like to tell her yourself, or should I?" James shook his head, that same patient smile still on his face. Sometimes, he knew, the most powerful lessons come from letting a story unfold naturally. The principal nodded and reached into her bag, pulling out a document that would answer all of Karen's unasked questions. A document that explained exactly why James Richardson had every right to be on this track at dawn. A document that would transform this moment from a potential tragedy into a powerful lesson about prejudice, perseverance, and the danger of jumping to conclusions. As she unfolded the paper, the morning breeze carried the sound of more cars arriving. The weekend track meet was about to begin, an event that would take on special significance given what had just transpired. And James Richardson's true role at Central Valley High School was about to be revealed in the most public and powerful way possible. As Principal Martinez held up the document, a sleek black SUV pulled into the parking lot. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Dr. Michael Chen, the district superintendent. His unexpected arrival added another layer of tension to the already charged atmosphere. Karen's face drained of color. She recognized him from school board meetings where she'd often voiced her opinions about maintaining community standards. But Dr. Chen wasn't alone. Following him was a camera crew from the local news station. They'd been scheduled to cover today's track meet for a very special reason. A reason that made the morning's events feel almost like a cosmic setup. The reporter, Sarah Jenkins, immediately sensed she walked into a much bigger story than the one she'd come to cover. Principal Martinez exchanged knowing looks with Dr. Chen before turning back to Karen. "You see," she began, "we were going to make the announcement at today's meet. The school board voted unanimously last week." She gestured toward James, who maintained his composed demeanor despite the growing crowd. "But since you're so concerned about who has the right to be here." Just then, Marcus, the freshman from the Dawn Runners program, stepped forward with something in his hands. It was the latest issue of Education Today magazine. On its cover was a familiar track, their track. But it wasn't the photo that made Karen's eyes widen. It was the headline, From Community Crisis to National Model: How One School's Athletic Program Became a Blueprint for Change. The article inside told a story that was about to become even more remarkable. It detailed how Central Valley High's Dawn Runners program had caught the attention of educational experts nationwide. How a struggling school had transformed itself through the vision of someone who understood its potential. How a young man who'd once begged for access to a rundown track had turned it into a launching pad for countless young dreams. Dr. Chen cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "Mrs. Richardson," he said, addressing Karen directly for the first time, "I assume you received the community newsletter last week." The irony of his words hung in the air. Karen's hand instinctively moved to her purse, where that unread newsletter probably still sat, its front-page story holding the very information that could have prevented this entire situation. The news crew had started filming, capturing the unusual scene. Police cars with lights still flashing, a growing crowd of students and parents, and at the center of it all, James Richardson standing on the track that had shaped his life. But they didn't know they were about to capture something even more newsworthy. Mr. Thompson stepped forward again, this time pulling out not just one photo, but a whole series of them. "Before you see that document," he said to Karen, "I think you should understand the full story." He laid the photos out one by one on the hood of a police car. Each image showed a progression, from a young boy running alone on a broken track, to a high school athlete breaking records, to a college graduate returning to coach, and finally, the last photo made Karen's breath catch. It had been taken just last week, in a room she knew well, a room where she'd attended countless school board meetings, often complaining about budget allocations and maintaining standards. The photo showed James shaking hands with Dr. Chen, both men smiling broadly. But it was the banner behind them that held the key to this morning's ultimate irony. Principal Martinez unfolded the document in her hands, but before she could read it, another car pulled into the lot. The person who stepped out wasn't just another parent or teacher. Their arrival was about to add the final powerful twist to a story that had already taken so many unexpected turns. The last person to arrive was Mayor Garcia, and she wasn't just there as a city official. She was there as a Central Valley High School alumna, and more importantly, as one of James Richardson's first Dawn Runners from 15 years ago. She walked straight to James, gave him a warm hug, and then turned to face Karen with a gentle but firm expression. "I see you've met our new athletic director and assistant principal," Mayor Garcia said, gesturing toward James. The revelation hung in the air as Karen's eyes widened with understanding. But that wasn't even the biggest news of the day. Principal Martinez finally held up the document she'd been waiting to share, a letter from the State Board of Education. As of next month, Principal Martinez announced, her voice carrying across the now silent parking lot, Central Valley High School will become the state center for athletic excellence, with James Richardson serving as its founding executive director. The program he started here will be implemented in schools across the state. The news crew scrambled to capture the moment as Karen's face cycled through a range of emotions: shock, embarrassment, and finally, something that looked like genuine remorse. The suspicious person, she reported, wasn't just an authorized visitor to the school. He was one of its highest-ranking administrators, a nationally recognized educator, and the architect of a program that was about to change thousands of young lives. But James wasn't focused on Karen's reaction. Instead, he turned to the gathered students, his Dawn Runners, the varsity team, and all the kids who'd shown up for morning practice. "This track," he said, his voice steady and clear, "has always been more than just a place to run. It's where dreams take shape, where barriers get broken, and where we learn that the only limits that matter are the ones we place on ourselves." Then came the moment no one expected, not even Principal Martinez. James walked over to Karen, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the ground. "Would you like to join us for the morning practice?" he asked, extending his hand. "See for yourself what we're building here?" The gesture stunned everyone present, but those who knew James well weren't surprised. This was exactly why he'd been chosen to lead the new state program, his ability to turn moments of conflict into opportunities for growth. Karen hesitated, then slowly took his hand. As she did, Mr. Thompson stepped forward one last time. He was holding one more photograph, the newest addition to the school's collection. It showed James at his appointment ceremony as athletic director, standing on the same track where he'd started his journey. But what made this photo special was the quote beneath it, words that James had spoken at his inauguration. "Every morning brings a new chance to rewrite your story." The news crew captured it all, the tears in Karen's eyes as she finally understood the magnitude of her misconceptions, the proud smiles of James's students, and the moment when prejudice gave way to possibility. But the story wasn't quite over. As everyone prepared for the morning's track meet, Mayor Garcia made one final announcement. The city council had unanimously voted to rename the athletic facility. The new sign was unveiled right there, in front of the gathered crowd, the James Richardson Center for Athletic Excellence, where every dawn brings new dreams. Later that day, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, James continued his training session just like any other Saturday. But now Karen sat in the bleachers, watching as he worked with his students. She'd asked to join the school's athletic advisory board, wanting to be part of the change rather than an obstacle to it. And there, on the track where it all began, a simple morning run had transformed into something much more powerful, a lesson about judgment, redemption, and the remarkable ways life comes full circle. As James always told his dawn runners, sometimes the finish line is just the beginning of a new race. The story of James Richardson and Central Valley High School would go viral, not just as another tale of racial profiling gone wrong, but as a testament to the power of perseverance, forgiveness, and the unshakable belief that everyone deserves a chance to prove who they really are. In the weeks that followed that transformative Saturday morning, Central Valley High School became more than just a local success story. It became a symbol of how misconceptions can lead to meaningful change. The video of Karen's confrontation with James went viral, but not for the reasons most people expected. Instead of fueling division, it sparked conversations about redemption, second chances, and the power of confronting our own biases. Karen's journey became an unexpected part of the narrative. She didn't just fade into the background after that morning. Instead, she became one of the Dawn Runners program's most vocal advocates. At the next school board meeting, she stood up and shared her story, her voice trembling but determined. "I thought I was protecting our school," she admitted, "but I was actually standing in the way of its greatest success story." The Dawn Runners program exploded in popularity. What started with a handful of kids running before sunrise grew into a movement. Other schools began adopting the model, and James found himself mentoring not just students, but also educators from across the country who wanted to learn from his approach. The track that had once been scheduled for demolition became a beacon of hope for communities facing similar challenges. Mr. Thompson, the retired janitor who'd first opened those gates for young James, became a regular fixture at morning practices. He'd bring coffee for the parents who came to watch their kids train, sharing stories about the determined 13-year-old who would become the architect of their community's transformation. His old photograph of James winning his first medal was enlarged and now hung prominently in the school's main hallway, right next to the current team's achievements. Mayor Garcia used the incident to launch a citywide initiative called Dawn of Understanding, a program that brought together community members from different backgrounds to break down barriers and build bridges of understanding. The first meeting was held right there on the track, with James and Karen co-hosting the event. But perhaps the most powerful outcome was the effect on the students themselves. Marcus, the freshman who reminded James so much of his younger self, found his own voice through the program. At the state championship meet 3 months later, he didn't just break James' old record. He showed other kids from struggling neighborhoods that their dreams were valid, their potential unlimited. The news crew that had arrived that Saturday morning ended up producing a documentary called Dawn's Light, the James Richardson story. It wasn't just about that one incident. It traced the full circle of a community's journey from prejudice to pride. The film featured interviews with James's mother, who still worked at the local diner, proud of how her son had transformed their community's story. Principal Martinez implemented a new tradition at Central Valley High. Every year at graduation, seniors would take one final lap around the track together, regardless of whether they were athletes or not. It became a symbol of their journey, not just through high school, but through the process of learning to see beyond surface judgments and quick assumptions. As for James, he kept his promise to be on that track every morning, just like he'd been for the past 15 years. But now he wasn't alone. Karen joined the morning walks, along with other community members who discovered that the track was more than just a running surface. It was common ground where differences dissolved in the light of shared purpose. The State Center for Athletic Excellence became a model for educational reform, proving that sometimes the most powerful changes start with the smallest steps, or in this case, with an early morning run and the courage to challenge our own assumptions. Schools across the country began reaching out, wanting to understand how a nearly defunct track program had become a catalyst for community transformation. 1 year after that fateful morning, Central Valley High School hosted a special anniversary event. Students, parents, educators, and community members gathered on the track at dawn. As the sun rose, James led everyone in a lap, not at a run, but at a walk, so that everyone could participate. Karen walked beside him, both of them sharing a knowing smile as they passed the spot where police cars had once parked with flashing lights. The story of James Richardson and Central Valley High School continues to inspire others to look beyond their first impressions, to recognize the potential in every person, and to understand that sometimes our greatest teachers are the moments that challenge our deepest assumptions. As James often tells his students, the track doesn't care who you are or where you come from. It's what you do with the opportunity that matters. And so, every dawn brings new runners to the track at Central Valley High School. They come not just to train their bodies, but to be part of a larger story, one that proves how a morning of misunderstanding can become a lifetime of meaning. Because in the end, it's not about how fast you run or how many records you break. It's about the courage to keep showing up, the wisdom to learn from mistakes, and the strength to help others find their own path to success. As the sun rises each morning over Central Valley High School, it illuminates more than just a track. It shines on a testament to the power of perseverance, the importance of second chances, and the truth that sometimes our greatest victories come not from proving others wrong, but from helping them see what's right. And that's a lesson worth running toward, every single day.